Hello, welcome to another video where we're looking at part 2 of our back pain myths busted. In this video here, which with all the videos, by the way, we're really looking at the reason that a lot of these strategies that people rely on don't work because they just look at one thing. Some of them have parts of it that will actually make sense and be useful, but without the remaining pieces of the puzzle, it may actually cause more problem than it will solve. So in this one here, we're really looking at the assumption that all back pain people have tight hamstrings, which is not actually true even when it appears that they do have tight hamstrings. So firstly, a lot of people confuse muscle tension with neural tension. People often blame the hamstrings, but it's actually in many cases a nerve being trapped around the spine here, to the sciatic nerve, and that's usually a problem to do with the hips and nothing to do with the actual hamstring itself. So when the nerve's trapped, and it's easy to spot this when you do a straight leg raise. So a straight leg with the knee locked out is a nerve stretch. If the knee's bent, it's a hamstring muscle stretch. A person with the tight nerve will really experience a lot of pain straight away and probably only get 45 degrees instead of a 90-degree angle with their leg, and they'll often complain of pins and needles and tingling in the calf or even in the back itself, even in the neck even sometimes. And this is just a sign of like a herniated disc and something compressing through that nerve. Alright, so that's not a hamstring problem but a nerve problem, and that's nothing to do with stretching the hamstring but fixing usually hip problems with the hips and the way that they're using them that's causing this lumbar spine to get compressing the nerve. So a good strategy for that is actually doing nerve flossing, and you've got to understand it's protecting you. Your hamstrings are actually trying to engage and protect you, so even if they do stiffen up, they're actually trying to stop you from hurting yourself. So the worst thing you can do is try to loosen it and get rid of it without releasing the trapped nerve. So nerve flossing is a good video on our YouTube channel. There's a link in the description under the video here to see that in action. But that's a great way of sort of releasing the nerve. It won't actually fix your problem, but it'll relieve you some of your sciatic pain. So now most people, when they think they've got tight hamstrings, is usually because they can't touch their toes. Alright, so usually when they bend, the tension is felt in their muscles, but the poor toe touches again will have more to do with the hip mobility and the hamstrings really tightening up, like more or less acting like a handbrake on a car. So for this reason, or for this 4 reasons why I find the toe touch is a very unreliable test for this. Alright, so firstly, the first reason is there's a poor posterior weight shift. So posterior weight shift is, actually I'll run through them all. The posterior weight shift is a problem. There's a stiff lower back, a stiff thoracic spine, and even tight calves. And again, like the hamstring is going to act like a protection of your body, especially your spine, when it experiences any of these things. And these could be a coordination thing, not necessarily a tight muscle. Could be a lack of stability even, or lack of strength. It's not necessarily just one thing. So firstly, if we look at this posterior weight shift, this is actually an exercise that people use in yoga and Pilates a lot, and this is where you can see posterior weight shift would mean that the hips are being pushed backwards, so the hips actually provide the mobility, and you're not trying to derive it all from the spine. Constantly doing this just creates huge tension on the nerve, and this is how you actually get a bulging disc as well. So the hamstrings are here are actually going to contract to prevent you from losing your balance and falling forward. So that you can see how here they're acting like the parking brakes. They will not turn off, and you wouldn't want them to. Alright, so some people are doing this as a bad habit. If you're doing this as an exercise, it's not a great strategy. But a lot of people are doing this and they can't do it because they don't use their hips well. If they had to use their hips, they would actually get like a hell of a long way further forward and not actually be creating the problems through all of their spine. The next one is where we see is when people are locked in extension too much. So this would be the example here of where the hips are tilted too far forward, and they're really jammed up through here. So again, it's learning how to mobilise the hips here. So the hip mobility could be a big problem. Could be also lack of strength. So the hamstrings, in actual fact, may actually be really loose, and they're actually really, really overstretched. That's what you would see in this posture, is that hips tilted so far forward, it's overstretching the hamstrings. They're under like maximum tension. So you don't actually want to stretch them. You want to learn how to mobilise the hips and have a bit of more of a neutral posture, and that will release those hamstrings being under so much tension. All right, so the hip mobility could be the big problem in this. This next one is the thoracic spine. This is another thing that we see. So this huge kyphosis sort of position. This also will greatly limit the person being able to achieve that toe touch. And very common for people who sit all the time, but again, maybe just poor posture, poor awareness. We'll often see the lordotic lumbar curve increase. So like on that last position, that increases, which creates hip problems. So you've got rigid thoracic spine or rigid hip. That's going to greatly impact the hamstrings flexibility, especially in the toe touch position. So improving the posture and getting, if I go back to this, getting back to more of a neutral position, make a huge difference in the performance of the toe touch drill, and the hamstrings will stop acting like a parking brake. Tight calves. So this knee hyperextension is another thing that we see quite a lot. So anyone with this, you're going to straight away get tension into the hamstrings as a result. So the stretching of the calf will do very little here. This could be more of a problem to do with stability at the feet, and again at the hip and the pelvis. So just poor position, and you'll see go back to here. You start to see this person starts to hyperextend really badly in this posture. So and greatly affect that toe touch drill. So how do you what do you do to assess to see if you really do have tight hamstrings? Well, normally we'll see this person's got a posterior tilt, and they'll have like a flat back type posture. They almost look like they've got no butt. So if you're standing against the wall, there's little to no gap between the floor and their lower back, or if you're lying on the floor as well with your knees bent, we'll see that back is dead flat. There's no neutral, there's no lumbar curve at all. When we see a person do a waiter's bow, as in here, with the spine in neutral, they won't be able to go very far, and they'll instantly feel the hamstrings grabbing even though their knees are bent. Again, this could be a hip problem. That's really the mechanism, or the thoracic or the calf. It could be all three. It could be just maybe the way they're doing it. Then maybe there's a problem at none of these joints, just their coordination is the problem. So again, we see here, if on a lifting your leg up, this will be an indication of someone with a tight hamstring and poor hip mechanics. So again, it could be the poor hip mechanics that's creating the tight hamstring. It's sort of difficult to say, but you'll see this sort of loss of position and the loss of the lumbar curve here is the real problem. And this is obvious. This is just real obvious to see, and this person often will have maybe abdominal tension as well, quite a lot. And again, they look like they have no butt. So it's a real sort of simple ways to test. If you're able to get into this position, you don't need to stretch your hamstrings. If you can get a 90 degrees with a straight leg, you're pretty good on that. All right. Stretching beyond this, trying to get further and further, will actually probably create more problems. You just want to have some tension, but not too much. Why are people tight? Well, again, we've sort of mentioned this before. You've got to find a reason why they're tight in the first place. That's one thing that people never ask. And hamstrings really act like a slave. So they really try to pick up the workload of other muscles failing to do their job, especially the glutes. And we'll see in a hip extension here, hamstring cramping due to glutes fatiguing really quickly or not even turning on at all. And this is a very simple test. So this is where you'll see these guys are going to constantly overwork, and they will never stop, and they will stay chronically short and tight until the glutes start to pick up their workload. All right, no stretching massage would make any difference at all, because the real problem is weakness, and these are reacting to it. A great quote here to sort of think about things not from a kinesiological standpoint. So movements are movement. So the whole point of this quote is to sort of not look at one muscle on its own. Look at how it interacts with others, and to move better, you really just need to learn how to position better and get them all working at the right time. You do that, and things stop grabbing you and creating stiffness and tension to protect you. Because a lot of the time it'll come back to just poor movement strategies that created your problem in the first place. So always remember, there's no one thing that solves your problem. There's only multiple methods that look at the whole picture. Always ask yourself the questions: why did I get the pain? Did the pain create my movement dysfunction, or did the movement dysfunction create my pain? If there's a tight muscle, as in the case of this, where maybe it's a hamstring, then there must be an opposing weak muscle, and maybe that is really the problem. Find the answer to these questions, and you're well on the way to getting the solutions that you're looking for a long-lasting success. All right. So, in summary, the take-home message is that the hamstrings are a slave muscle, and they're trying to protect you. Never stretch a tight nerve. Always look at improving your mobility of the hips and the thoracic. Learn how to bend correctly using your hips. Improve your stability, and you might find stretching is not even required at all. Always look at how you move, for this is the real reason behind imbalances and dysfunctions. Alright, so if you have any questions or comments, chuck them on the comments underneath the video here. There's stacks of free reports. I've put things in the description, and there's an online video you can also download, and that'll give you step-by-step assessments and tests and programs that you can use to guide you on how to improve your toe touch, if that's what you want to do, and get rid of back pain altogether. Alright, so I hope you've enjoyed that video, and we'll see you on our next one.